Welcome to Pregnant Tea, your cozy corner in the world of pregnancy where we sip on stories, wisdom, and the occasional cup of actual tea. I'm your host, Kendra Pace from Natural State Wellness. Each week, we brew up candid conversations with mothers who've walked the path you're on, sharing their triumphs, challenges, and everything in between. We also invite professionals to spill the tea on tips, tricks, and techniques for each stage of pregnancy. We'll be talking about everything from prenatal care to postpartum recovery. So whether you're a first-time mom-to-be or a seasoned pro, grab your favorite mug and settle into your comfiest chair as we venture into this crazy and wonderful world of pregnancy together. This morning on Pregnant Tea, we've got Courtney, and she's going to be sharing her pregnancy, birth story, and postpartum experience with solely breastfeeding.
Hi everyone, I'm Courtney. I have a almost 20-month-old daughter, Cora. She's the best. I'm a wife. We met in 2016. We definitely knew we wanted a family, and we didn't start trying until 2021, I believe. Mm-hmm. We actually were very blessed and did not struggle with any fertility issues or anything like that, so very thankful. We started trying in December and then found out that I was pregnant in January, the end of January. So it was fast.
Yes, fertile myrtles.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is so funny because you don't know. You've spent your whole life trying not to get pregnant. And then when you're trying to get pregnant, you just don't know how it's going to go. And Obviously so many women can relate to that. And yeah, thankfully for me, like it didn't take much time, and yes, and
here we are. How was the pregnancy?
So I had a pretty good pregnancy. Obviously everyone's pregnancy is hard in one way or another, but I did not have any morning sickness or anything like that, which was nice. I had some nausea, but for the most part, it was pretty good. I did end up becoming pretty anemic. So my doctor put me on vitamins because if my numbers didn't start to increase, then I would have had to have a blood transfusion. So thankfully I didn't have to have that. I was able to increase enough to where it wasn't in the scary zone anymore. Not as much as she would have wanted, but it wasn't concerning at that point.
Okay.
And then another thing that I actually did have was gestational diabetes. I did the glucose drink. You did the 1 hour one.
What flavor did you pick?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember.
I just hear
orange, maybe.
I hear horrible things.
They're not that bad. They're not at all. Like everyone is so scared of the drink. It's not bad. It tastes like a watered down like Gatorade type of.
I could do that all day.
They're easy. It's just kind of thicker, because of all the sugar. You just gotta chug it and just get it down the hatch.
College days.
Yeah. So I did the 1 hour one and then failed that, and then had to go back for the 3 hour one. So at the 1 hour one, you drink the 50-gram drink.
Okay.
And then at the 3 hour one, you drink the 100-gram.
Could you feel the difference?
I honestly felt fine.
Okay.
I was very nervous about it because I know a lot of people get very nauseous or throw up. I was very nervous about that, but I honestly felt fine.
That's
so
great.
Yeah.
And
then I failed the 3 hour one. So after that, they set me up with a nutritionist.
Nice.
And I had to meet with her. Yep. She explained everything, what to look for on food labels, making sure you're pairing carbs with protein so your body can metabolize it the correct way.
No naked carbs. Love
and
that.
all of that stuff. And so, which was really cool. I did learn a lot from her and just from that experience. When you first think about it, when I was explaining it to my mom, because she didn't know, obviously. So she's like, oh, you're not going to be able to eat carbs because people think it's associated with the sugar, which it is. But if you're eating protein with it, then it helps balance it. So yeah, it was great. I had to log all of my food and then submit it to her every week. So she could look at it and be like, okay, yep, you're doing great. You have no concerns.
Who provided the nutritionist?
So the hospital that I was working with. And so when I would submit those numbers, because you have to take your finger prick before you eat anything to see what your baseline is. And then after each meal to see what your body is doing after eating food. When I would do it in the morning, my numbers were always super low, like 67, in the high 60s, very low 70s. They're like, normally people are in the hundreds, 90s, hundreds. Normally that's what they see. And so it was a very interesting thing. So I would she was just telling me to eat snacks before bed and try and like increase my numbers for the morning. So I was eating apples and peanut butter before bed and all of this stuff, trying to get some extra, stuff in my system.
Right.
And it honestly didn't really do much. But what actually ended up helping, and I don't know if this is the right thing or not, but is having a bowl of ice cream before bed, which is, you would think, well, don't do that, but it worked for me. And it made, even still, my numbers were still in the very like low 70s, but it was a little bit higher, compared to the apple with peanut butter.
How would you feel in the morning waking up?
Fine. No, totally fine.
So no difference.
No. And I never really felt
off.
Yeah. No.
Good for you, but also dang, because maybe that would have been a signifier of what was happening.
Yeah. Well, so my entire pregnancy too, Cora was on the Weight Watch.
Okay.
So I was measuring small and she was measuring small. But I'm 4'10", for those of you who can't see me in person. So I'm small. And so my doctors weren't super concerned, but it was obviously something they had to monitor. So they're like, well, you're little, so you're probably not going to have this huge belly and huge baby.
Right.
But they did extra ultrasound to check her measurements. We did go down to Albany for a specialist, and they did an extensive anatomy scan. And the doctor there was like, no, everything looks normal. I'm predicting you could have a 7-pound baby, like normal. So I was like, okay, great.
Right.
But at each appointment that I had with my regular OB, they would, check me and measure and all of that. And I think it's also very tech dependent.
Yes.
Not being able to get certain measurements and
user error.
Yeah. And definitely position of the baby. They move around all the time.
Right.
So it's hard to get certain measurements. And there was a period of time where they couldn't get her diaphragm. So they were like, we can't detect her breathing, I guess, which obviously she's breathing, like heartbeat.
Right.
But they couldn't get her diaphragm. They were telling me that she was measuring small, and they were telling me that her head was measuring small. So I had to do these non-stress tests where they hook up the little fan to your belly and they just wait for a certain number of movements and whatnot. And then if they pass, then they send you on your way. And thankfully, every time I did those, she would always pass. And they would have me, drink some cold water to get her wiggling around and stuff. But that was all okay. But that was definitely a stressful period.
Yeah. How'd you feel going through all that, you and your husband?
Yeah. I mean, obviously being a first-time mom, you're scared of everything.
Right.
So just that extra, stress. Oh my gosh, she's measuring small. Is she okay? Just the constant worry, of course, especially being a first-time mom.
Did you have some doctors or nurses who were more helpful than others in understanding that you're a first-time mom and trying to ease that?
Yes and no. So at the place that I was at, you see a variety of people. You don't know who you're going to have on the day of your birth. So they introduce you to everybody. So there were different doctors that were kinder than others, who had better bedside manner. And the one doctor was very reassuring. Like, you're small. I don't expect you to have a massive baby or a big belly, just all these things. And so she was super nice. But then on the other hand, I did have this one woman who was very blunt and matter of fact, and she scared the life out of me, and I ended up crying in the room. And she could see it on my face, and she's like, did I just scare you? And I'm like, yeah. And I just started bawling. And I think, and she did kind of change her attitude a little bit. It was just, I don't know, obviously every doctor is different. Some have better bedside manner than others. But the woman who was actually really nice and reassuring, she actually ended up being the person who delivered.
Perfect.
So, so that was amazing. So them telling me that she's measuring small all these weeks that I've been going, I got to my 38-week appointment. And at that point, we're like, we think that you need to be induced because we think that she will grow better on the outside than she is on the inside. So that's kind of where they were at that point. So we set up my induction process, and I was actually 39 weeks and 4 days when I went in to be induced anyway. So I wasn't super early. So yeah, we went in on September 27th for the induction process, and it was like 3 days of torture. So we started out with the Cervidil, which is the shoelace looking string that they insert. They placed that on Thursday night, and then you have to have it in for 12 hours. So then they took it out in the morning, and I was only dilated to 1 centimeter. So then they did the balloon. I think that was, again, 12 hours. So you had to have that in.
Was that uncomfortable at all, that procedure?
Yeah, it was pretty uncomfortable. It's kind of equivalent to if anyone's had like IUD placed.
Okay.
Yeah, the pain, while cramping, it's relatively quick, but it's still pretty painful. That was in for 12 hours, and then they took it out again in the morning. I was 3 centimeters dilated. So yeah, we weren't really, getting as far along as we were hoping.
Right.
But at that point is when they broke my water, which honestly, out of everything I experienced, was the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life.
Really?
Yeah, thank God it was a second, because it was excruciating pain I've ever felt. It was horrible.
Wow.
But yeah, again, it was very quick.
But still.
Thank God. Yeah. So they broke my water, and that's when things started to get real.
Okay.
That's when the contractions started.
Immediately, or?
I would say within maybe an hour of them breaking my water. Yeah. And things started to really pick up. And they started me on the Pitocin. They start you very slowly with the Pitocin, obviously, a very low amount, and then they increase you every hour. It's kind of like trial and error, because if they give you, obviously they're monitoring the baby and all of that stuff and me. But if your contractions are becoming too quick, they have to back you off the Pitocin. So that was happening for a little bit. So they ended up backing me off a little, and then they would have to bump it back up. So it's just a constant up and down with the Pitocin levels. I ended up laboring for a good while on my own. I think I was 7 centimeters dilated when I finally did get the epidural. I got that at midnight the night before. They did tell you, request it before you think you need it.
Okay.
Because we're not sure how long the wait is.
That's good that they prepped you.
Yeah. Thankfully, they came really quick. I think it was maybe 30, 45 minutes. So it was
great.
Really, really quick. And the doctor who placed that was amazing.
Great.
Like, it worked. It perfect. Literally no complaints. Like, it was perfect. And I know there's like horror stories of that as well. Thankfully, that was not the case for me. But yeah, I got it in at midnight, and then labored through the night. And again, with the Pitocin, they're on and off, increasing, decreasing, whatever, and flipping me from side to side, because if I'm on my left side and then the baby's heart rate drops, they come in and flip you to the other side. I was using a peanut ball to help dilate and get things going.
Did they provide that for you?
Yep, they provided that. They provided a little bouncy ball thing for me to bounce on. So that was nice. And I think the peanut ball really did help open everything up and dilate. I would definitely recommend to other people. I think that really helped me, at least.
And that's great to know that in a hospital setting, a lot of hospitals do, you request that. They might not necessarily be like, here's this to help you, but to ask, because it really can help open things up.
Right. Yeah, so that was really helpful. And yeah, it's just the constant nurses coming in and flipping me, and I'm like, well, what's wrong? What's wrong? Like, the baby's hurt. It's so much stress, and, not eating for 3 days because you're just stressed and you don't feel well. And the last thing you want to do is eat something.
Right.
So between not sleeping, not eating, you really are just so depleted from everything. And then I think after you do get the epidural, you aren't allowed to eat. So that's also a thing. So however long people have that in for, just prepare for that. A thing that I did take with me, but I didn't end up using, are honey sticks. I've heard a lot of people, I was just so stressed, and like,
I'm sure it was the last thing on your mind.
It really was, but I've heard a lot of people saying that they had really good experience with the honey sticks that helped give them some energy. So maybe next time
hopefully next time it won't be this prolonged.
Hopefully not, because it was a lot, for 3 days.
What was the experience like for your husband? Was he allowed to sleep in the room with you? What was the setup like for you guys?
Yeah, so they gave him a little cot chair kind of thing, and he was with me the whole time, which was nice. And my mom, she stayed over, I think, one night, and then came back the next day for the other times, because she wanted to give us space, but also I wanted her there. I wanted my mom, so it was a good balance for that. So I got the epidural at midnight, and then I started pushing at noon the next day. So it was fairly quickly. And Cora definitely did have a very traumatic birth. So I started pushing, and of course the midwives are like, it's normal for a mom to push for 3 or 4 hours. I'm thinking, when she first told me that, I'm thinking, no way. Like, there's no way. Who pushes for 4 hours? Me, I did. Yeah. Oh my God. I started pushing at noon, and it's just kind of like practice pushing. They're trying to get you to feel what it feels like to push. You know, every contraction, you're practice pushing, trying to get the baby to come down. At first, because I had the epidural, I couldn't feel my contractions. So the nurses had to be like, okay, you're having a contraction, push. And then the epidural eventually wears off. So you can start to feel the contractions, which is helpful, but obviously also painful. But also too, for me, I don't have a very large torso. And so I couldn't crunch up to bear down really well. So I was trying different positions. I tried holding onto the bar with a towel. I tried hands and knees. I tried every position.
And were the nurses and people guiding you in this, or did you just know to try these positions?
The midwife and the nurses were definitely there to be like, all right, let's try this. Let's, give it a try and see what happens. And it was very hard for me, to crunch up because I didn't have any space really to do that. So that made it hard to push. So I think that also kind of contributed to the long pushing time.
Yeah.
So after just pushing for so long, I felt like I wasn't making any progress and I was exhausted.
Yeah.
I had literally nothing in me.
Well, you just went 3 days.
Yeah, 3 days with being tortured for induction, not drinking, not sleeping, not eating, all that stuff. I had no energy. And then pushing for 3 hours was exhausting. And so Cora ended up getting stuck.
Okay.
One of her shoulders was stuck. So her head was out and one of her shoulders and her other shoulder was stuck. And so that's when the high energy started happening.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but everyone floods the room. I had like 20 people in my room all of a sudden. Bells and whistles are going off and the doctors are calling for emergency OR, all of this crazy stuff. They're literally throwing me from back to front, just throwing me. Like I was a doll.
Oh my gosh.
Trying to get Cora out of me because her heart rate's going down. Everyone's panicking, obviously, at this point. There was nurses on both sides of me, the doctor. I swear they were trying to break my hip bones to get her out. Yeah, because they were just jumping on my hip bones trying to get her out of me. And I don't know how she came out, but those doctors and nurses got her out.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't end up needing a C-section. But when Cora came out, she wasn't breathing. So they whisked her away to the little table and they were doing whatever. I couldn't see her. And all I knew was what's happening right now? Is my baby okay? Is she alive? It was terrifying. And to not, all I kept saying is she okay? Is she okay? Is she okay? And I was just sobbing hysterically, obviously. Right. And all the doctors kept saying to me is they're working on her. That's all they could say. And it was the most just horrific moment in my life. It was horrible. I was just sobbing. It was awful. And then all of a sudden I hear her little cry. Ugh. Yeah, I know. It was just the best. And then they finally put her on my chest. And then it was just, from that point on, it was.
Oh, I know. You make me emotional.
I know. It was hard. For a while, I couldn't even tell the story because I would just cry. But it was the worst moment of my life, followed by the best moment. The adrenaline, the emotions, just. It's like an out-of-body experience almost. It's the most intense thing.
And you can't do anything. Right. You're incapacitated.
Yeah.
And so
I just was laying there what is going on? What is going on with my baby?
You just have to trust the team at that point.
Yeah. And it was crazy. It was intense, definitely. I did end up tearing. But honestly, out of everything, it was a 2nd-degree tear. It wasn't even as bad as other people have experienced. You're definitely very swollen and sore. And then I did have stitches, so that was painful.
Yeah.
But honestly, you don't even care. You really don't. I was just so infatuated with this little baby. It didn't matter. It's painful, but like it's fine. You can do it.
People do it all the time.
That was like the last thing on my mind was me and that pain. All I cared about was holding her and being with her, and and that you don't even think about it.
That gives me the chills that you're just like, I just went through all of that, and at the end of the day,
it didn't even matter. Yeah,
that's incredible. And then, so how long did you have to stay in the hospital?
So we stayed. So I was there on the 27th, September 27th, and then we left. I think it was October 3rd. She was born on the 1st, October 1st. So we were there for a good 5 days.
And did she have to have a lot of monitoring?
So since I had the gestational diabetes, they had to monitor her sugar when she came out. So they had to do heel sticks and monitor her. And she was jaundiced, but she didn't need to go under a light. So that was good. But after a few tests with the sugar levels, she passed and was fine. So they didn't have to do that anymore. But yeah, that was really it for her, like monitoring her. Of course, I wouldn't let her leave the room because I'm, that mom.
I would be that mom too.
I don't want her to go to the nursery. I don't want to get sleep. My baby in the room. Like, fine.
I'm just going to stare at her anyway. It's fine.
Yeah. And if she did have to go anywhere, I had my husband go because obviously I couldn't go. So I had him go and he went, and so it's fine. So no one was ever not with her.
I
was that mom, which, I mean, everyone at the hospital I was at was amazing. I had the best nurses and doctor ever. 0 complaints. Honestly, they were all wonderful.
That's great.
So I know, a lot of people don't get that experience, but for me, they were great. I wouldn't change anything on it. I would change the trauma.
Sure.
But as far as people who helped me, like, amazing.
That's incredible to hear.
Yeah.
I feel like we need more of that.
Yeah.
Like that's really great.
Yeah.
And then how was latching and stuff?
Yeah. So it's actually funny because the second they placed the baby on my chest, I started lactating.
Isn't that funny?
Isn't that crazy?
Our bodies are incredible.
Yeah. I forget what this doctor was. She's the one that did like the footprints and all of that stuff for Cora. I forget her exact title, but Cora was on my chest and she was going over things with me, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're lactating." And you see the orange coming out, and she's like, "Do you mind if I give it to the baby?" And I was like, "Sure." So she just scooped it up on her finger and put it in Cora's mouth, and it was just wild. And the lactation consultant comes in and kind of helps with everything. And at first, they have you hand express the milk out, and you give such a small amount to them at first because their bellies are so tiny. But I produced so much, which was unheard of, and I was the talk of the maternity ward.
The talk of the town.
Yeah, and it was so funny. Everyone kept coming in and being like, "Oh, you're the girl that." I was like, I didn't realize that this was such a a thing. But I had so much colostrum that I produced, and I forgot some of it at the hospital, and they ended up calling me, "You want to come back and get it?" And I was like, we were already so far home, it was fine. But part of me wanted to go back.
I know, that's this liquid gold.
Yeah,
seriously.
Yeah, and I was like, fine, just fine. Like, you're still producing more, it's fine. I produced so much colostrum when I was in the hospital,
and that's the really good
stuff. Yeah. So
not that breast milk isn't, but that colostrum.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, so it was just fun.
Cora's a lucky girl.
Yeah.
Your body knew she needed it.
Yeah.
Like, she had an experience.
Yeah.
Let's heal her up.
Give this mama a break. And then my milk came in once we got home, the majority of it, which was
again
intense.
A lot.
The amount, the pain, just it's a lot. I've had a really great milk supply, so I've definitely been lucky in that. It came in fast and furious, just very engorged, very painful. It kind of almost feels like knots in a muscle. And I was so worried about getting mastitis, which I never thankfully got. But my husband's sister actually flew in to see the baby and meet her. And she was my angel. She has 2 boys, so she's done this before. And honestly, if she was not there, I don't know what I would have done. She helped me out so much. I'm so thankful for her. She was able to tell me, yep, this is normal, things like that. And I had so many just knots and things because I was so engorged. She was helping massage and try and relieve some of the pain. And oh my gosh, she was just so amazing.
And how long did the pain persist?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the beginning, when you're first starting, it's a good 11 days of pain, for me at least. I mean, I'm sure everyone's different, but between the amount of milk I had, being super engorged, and then of course your nipples are very scabbed and sore and all of that. But I loved breastfeeding. It was one thing that I wanted to do so badly. And so I just mustered through the pain. I just did it. But I mean, there's so many things to help with nipple pain, scabbing, and things like that. The creams that you can get, there's like shields. Now, knowing all of that, I did use I did have like nipple butter. I tried that a few times and it didn't really seem to make much of a difference. So yeah, but for new moms, get the butter, get the nipple shields, get all of that. I did end up getting a massager. It's a little handheld massager for your boobs to help, one, stimulate milk, helps produce milk, and then also to help get like knots out. And I call them knots, but they're not right.
But that's what it feels like. How often were you doing that to help relieve some of the...
I only did that a couple of times, and honestly, just using your own hands or having your husband or your partner, whoever, help massage was helpful. It helps relieve the pain a bit. But yeah, I mean, just so much milk. So and you're just like
a tiny
constantly leaking, like changing your shirt all the time because you're just leaking. You're waking up in the middle of the night, you're in a puddle.
Oh my gosh. And so you solely breastfed?
Yeah.
No pumping?
So I did pump because I had so much milk. I had to pump because it was painful. So between feeding her and then pumping, it was constant.
A full-time job?
Yeah, a full-time job, definitely. And because I was feeding her on demand, I didn't really stick to a timetable with breastfeeding. I know some people are like 7 o'clock very scheduled. I didn't do that. I just did on demand.
And that helps your milk production too.
It actually does. The more you're nursing or pumping, it helps increase your supply too. I would have to wake up at least once in the night to pump because I was just so uncomfortable. So she's been exclusively breastfeeding on demand for now coming on 20 months.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. To moms who want to do that, which I know some don't, it just doesn't work for their schedule. So for moms who want to do that, you work too. So explain a little bit how you make that work.
Yeah.
So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky to stay home with her for a long period of time. And then I do work part-time. And my mom would watch Cora for me. And of course, my mom is just the best too. So that helps, of course. But so when I would be at work, my mom would come to me, my lunch breaks, and allow me to nurse Cora. So that was special. And then also too, if I needed to pump at work, I would pump. And before I would go to work, I would feed her in the morning. And then my mom would come see me on my lunch break and I would feed her then. And then when I would get home, I would feed her too. So I was still nursing quite a bit. And then my mom could feed her obviously in between that.
Was it a struggle? Did she put up a fight at all having someone else feed her? Or was she pretty good with a bottle?
She really didn't like bottles. So that's another reason why my mom would come to me, because she just preferred breastfeeding. She took a bottle, I want to say up until like 2 months. And then at that point, she just refused.
She's like, I want the real deal.
Yeah, I want the real deal. Yeah. Yep. I was able to stay home with her when she was really little. And then when my mom was having her, she was starting to eat the pureed foods. So she wasn't going with nothing. We knew she was eating stuff in her belly and wasn't starving. So that was also helpful. The fact that she just was also still eating a little food. Yeah.
How often, now being 20 months, does she demand breastfeeding?
This girl.
With that face, I'm like, oh boy.
I don't think she'll ever stop breastfeeding. She is a boob girl.
You got to get that second baby on board.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's still on demand. It's constant all day. It's definitely a comfort thing. And it's not long periods of time like it was when she was little. When you're first breastfeeding, you're breastfeeding for a half an hour. And now it's just like,
boob, bye.
Literally just one little sip and then she's back to playing. Like, but it's still constant throughout the day. She's constantly coming over to me and wanting that. And I think just more so for like connection. I don't think she's necessarily hungry because at this point she's eating regular food and breastfeeding is a bonus. She's definitely using it for comfort and then still throughout the entire night as well.
So do you guys co-sleep?
Yeah, so we started out with her in the bassinet next to me. And then honestly, sleep is it's just a rare thing and you'll do anything for it. You'll get to that point where you'll do anything for some sleep. So I did end up co-sleeping with her. I think she was probably 3 months old at that point, and it worked out great for us. I know everybody is different with that. I had my back towards my husband, so he wasn't near her. I had a pillow on the edge so she couldn't go anywhere. So I was very careful with how I did it because obviously it's concerning. You don't want anything to happen. And she would just nurse throughout the night that way, which was nice because I didn't have to get up and get her.
Right.
She was just right there. So that made it a little easier. I was able to get more sleep that way, which was helpful. She just co-slept with us for a long time. And then I did start transitioning her to her crib. We moved the crib into our bedroom, just easy transition for everyone. And I was, of course, I just wanted her there with me.
Right.
And honestly, the co-sleeping was, I did it for a lot of reasons. I did it for sleep. I did it for just the fact that I wanted to hold my baby. I just wanted her next to me. A lot of things went into that decision. I just wanted her there. I just needed it.
It's an incredible way to build your bond and her trust in you. I think there's so many benefits to co-sleeping, but it can be scary for people. And so to hear that you did it successfully for a long time.
Yeah. And we still do it.
Encouraging. I love that.
Yeah. So now we moved the crib back into her nursery a couple of weeks ago. And she starts out in her crib. And then in the middle of the night, she wakes up and then I take her in the bed with us. So it's a little of both. I feel like she's just using me as a pacifier, basically, just for comfort at this point. Of course, she's getting milk, but it's not as extensive as what I first produced. My supply has decreased at this stage.
I really love that you talked about co-sleeping because, like I said, so many people are so afraid of that.
It's a stigma, I feel like. People,
definitely.
You hear that and people are like, oh my gosh, you co-sleep. And then you talk to other people and they're like, oh yeah, same. And before I even made the decision, I read so many articles about it, doing research about it, because people scare you. So I did a ton of research. I read lots of articles. This one article I did read, it was a doctor who wrote the article. And she was basically like, co-sleeping changed my life for the better. She was able to get some sleep and then therefore be a better mom, obviously during the day.
It affects everything.
And she ended up co-sleeping with all 4 of her kids.
Wow.
All 4 of her babies.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like hearing stuff like that, just kind of reassured.
Yes.
And of course, when I first started co-sleeping, I was very nervous. And like I said, I set up the bed all in
made little barriers.
I did. And I had, my husband was nowhere near her because I didn't want him to hit her or anything. And I actually don't really move a lot when I sleep anyways. I feel, at least for me, I am a very light sleeper. I think now more so becoming a mom. I hear the slightest little sound and I'm awake. And I feel like I actually don't ever get into REM sleep at all. You're just so aware of everything. And I think that just comes with
you got that mama bear instinct.
I really think it comes though. Like it just naturally comes.
Right.
My husband will be dead asleep.
Right.
And I'm like, how did you not hear her crying? And he's like, oh, I didn't hear her. I'm like, she's in the bed with us and she's crying. He has to get up and go to work. So he needs to be well rested as well. But it's just funny, like he didn't hear her crying at all. And I hear the slightest little anything sound. And I'm like, what's going on?
The difference.
Yeah, it is. It's such a huge difference.
I feel like you talking on all of the topics is really what shows the beauty of parenting. any of these situations can work for anybody or not work. It's so personalized. And I want to encourage women and their partners to really start internalizing things and really trusting your gut and what sounds good to you, what works personally for you. Yes, of course, listen to the opposing sides. That's always a great choice, but to do the research for yourself and just say, this is what's going to work best for me and my family. I think that there's a slow change happening. Yeah. But that's my hope, is to give women this confidence that you can do something that might not be the mainstream thing to do right now. Yep. If it feels right to you, you're safe, your baby's safe. Why not? Yeah. Do the research, trust your gut, trust your intuition as a mom. I mean, that speaks volumes, and it's just so tailored to everyone. And what works for me may not work for someone else, and that's fine. No one needs to judge or mom shame, or, I mean, being a mom is hard enough. People don't need that in their life. You're dealing with enough as a new mom, as a mom in general. You're tired, you're stressed, you're constantly worrying about your baby. Am I doing this right? Is this okay? Is she growing? Is she gaining enough weight? Is she getting enough milk? You're constantly worrying as it is. And then to have just the negative people in your ear is just unnecessary. Right. I could not agree more. Yeah. I think there just needs to be more support in general. Yeah, and even if it's an opposing view, try to understand it. You don't have to agree with it. Yeah. But look into it. I think that curiosity is one of the best things. If I find someone and they have a view that's so completely drastic from mine, I'm like, there has to be some semblance of truth in it. So let me look into this. Yeah. And then, sometimes they're like, no, I still, I still believe in my gut. Like, I see where you're coming from. You can understand them. You can see their viewpoint. And it may not align with yours. It's okay. But at the end of the day, you guys are all moms and parents are doing something hard. And so you can come together on that. Yeah. There has to be, I'm sure there's one story at the end of the day that you can relate on with someone who has completely different views than you on everything else. My best friend, she has a son, and she did not go sleep with her son because that wasn't right for her. And she's more of a scheduled person where she has more of a structure throughout her day. As for me, I'm more go with the flow. I don't really schedule things. I kind of just let Cora dictate the day or whatever, and who's right or wrong. You know what I mean? What works for her is great. What works for me, it works. And we can still be best friends, and we can still do motherhood together, and we can still, and it's great. We lean on each other all the time. She asks me, oh, when did Cora start doing this or that? Her son is younger than Cora, so he just turned 1. And we go back and forth with each other, and it's great having that person to support you and do motherhood with, and even need it. See a different perspective. Maybe you're stuck in a rut and you're like, I just can't see past this difficulty that we're having right now. And just to have someone else that you trust be like, well, this is what we tried. Right. Giving advice, giving suggestions, also just being able to share your fear with someone else is comforting, and someone who isn't your spouse, I feel like, is also helpful. It's just not the same. Right. It's just different. When you're a mom, it's just different. I don't know how to explain it. So of course your spouse is supportive and helpful. Hopefully they're your partner. Yeah. But it's just different when you have that mom in your corner. Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. Yeah. So anything in particular for new moms? Again, everything is so different and personal for everyone, but I think just doing the research in specific topics like vaccinations, do your research on it, and then come to a conclusion of what you and your spouse want to do in regard to that. Breastfeeding, yes or no? Just if you don't want to breastfeed, totally fine. Research different formula brands. Just do research, I think, and come to the best conclusion that works for you and your family. And intuition too is just such a huge thing. I think so too. Yeah. And then more often than not, when women are like, I should have trusted my gut. Yes. I hear that a lot, especially in the labor birth process, where they were pressured into getting an epidural or pressured into whatever. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's especially for a first-time mom. Scary. It's hard. It's scary. Yeah. And you don't know what your body's going to do. Right.
didn't know how birth was going to go because I've never done it before.
Right. That's how you learn.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, Cora was not a small baby. They were telling me that she was going to be 5 pounds until I preemie closed. And she was 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Yep.
She was perfect.
She was perfect. That's what I weighed when I was a baby.
Gosh.
My sister both weighed the same. 6 pounds, 8 ounces.
Runs in the family.
Yeah. So, yep, perfectly healthy baby. Not abnormally small, not tiny, not preemie, nothing.
Well, I love that it sounds like you have stepped into your power and you're trusting your gut, and you and your husband sound like a good team on all of this. So although it was a traumatic birth experience, perhaps you guys are crushing it.
Well, and also just experiencing that, my doctors are telling me that if I do have a second baby, they want me to do a C-section, which I really don't want to do for a lot of reasons. So honestly, having that fear, and of course, obviously, if the baby is in the wrong position, you can't, it is what it is. But I don't want it to be my only option. So it's scary. I don't obviously want another traumatic birth.
Of course not.
But then if I don't have to have a C-section, I don't want one. It's just very hard. And hopefully, if we do get pregnant with another baby, I'll have a doctor who isn't only set on the C-section.
Is there anything you're planning on doing to kind of prepare yourself for other options, or should it come down to a C-section? How are you going about that?
That's actually a great question. So obviously, being a first-time mom, you don't know what to do to prep really for labor. Right. So you hear all these things like, oh, drink the raspberry leaf tea, eat the dates, do this, do that. And you're like, oh, well, are these old wives' tales? Is there anything to back that? I didn't really do much of anything in regards to prep. And I've heard stories of other women like, oh, I did all these things to prep and they had amazing deliveries. It's so hard to know, oh, is that what worked for you, or is that just your body? So, but I'm like, whatever, it can't hurt. I'll drink the raspberry leaf tea the second time. I'll eat the dates. All these natural things that could potentially help. Why not try it? So I think I will do more research for that. And then also hire a doula, someone who is educated in different avenues of birth and things that I wouldn't necessarily know. Just having someone else give me some education in that regard as well. And then if I end up needing a C-section, it's not the end of the world. I've heard, of course, everyone has a good or bad story with that as well, just like with anything else. But my biggest fears with a C-section is I don't do well with medication in general. The medication they give you for C-sections are pretty intense. So I've heard a lot of horror stories of moms not being well to even hold their baby for 2 days. They're completely out of it. They're sick. They're throwing up. They're dizzy. They can't.
And that's so important for bonding time.
I want that baby on my chest immediately. So that's honestly one of the biggest reasons why I don't want a C-section, is because one, you don't get the immediate contact with the baby on your chest. You have to wait however long. And then also the medications. I feel I will be the person who's very sick, having to recover from coming off of that medication. That's a huge fear. I just want to be able to hold my baby and breastfeed and do all the things that I want to do after having a baby. And of course, safety is obviously number one. And like, healthy baby, healthy mom, all of those things. But I just don't want it to be my only option. And that's kind of what they were saying, which kind of just, freaks me out a little bit.
And I think the frustrating part is I feel often doctors will shame you into feeling like you need that C-section because aren't you concerned for the safety of your baby? But both things can exist at the same time. You can want to have a beautiful dream birth, and you can also want your baby to be safe and healthy in all of that. And that doesn't mean it has to be a C-section. The second time around, if I'm able to give birth naturally, and try the pushing process. If I come to the point where I was last time, where I wasn't making a lot of progress, it was taking hours, then, okay, maybe we stop at that point and we call the OR and we book an emergency C-section. That will be something that I may talk with them about. Can that be an option? I don't want it to get to the emergency scary part,
But
why not have a middle ground?
Yeah, right.
Like, can we try it my way?
Right.
And when if things,
right.
which hopefully they wouldn't,
right.
start to go south, then let's go into those interventions.
Right. Let's not push for 3.5 hours this time. And maybe we do an hour. See how, if I'm not making any progress, maybe we have that conversation. I just don't want it to be my only option. It's very discouraging. And it honestly scares me into wanting a second baby, which I obviously do want a second baby. So it's just that fear in the back of my mind. And of course, like, you need a C-section, it is what it is. But and we'll cross, that bridge when you get there. I just don't want it to be my only option.
And I think that's totally
okay.
It's
just finding the person who's willing to work with me in that, finding someone on the same page. And then again, the place that I did give birth at, you aren't with the same doctor. It's a bunch of doctors that you're meeting with. And so you don't know who you're going to get on the day of your delivery, which kind of stinks, but I feel like it's just how it is these days.
And I feel like it's such a vulnerable time in general for you to be pregnant, laying in this bed with all these people around you. And so to have someone that you're comfortable with and you guys have talked about this and you're on the same page is, worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. And then having a doula there as well, being my backup and my advocate and just there to be in my corner and have that extra support too, I think will be helpful this next time around.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited for you. See what the next journey brings you. Yeah. I hope that you get your dream practitioner, whoever that may be.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on Pregnant Tea, Courtney. It was great.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in on Pregnant Tea. I hope you've enjoyed listening to wisdom from our community of mothers and experts. If you want more relatable stories and empowering advice, head over to www.nswellness.net to subscribe for the latest content. Until next time, take care of yourself.